So I just, okay.
We'll make the...
Where am I looking?
Oh, you're right here.
Okay. I'm good. Oh, you can see my wire. How's my line?
Line's good.
You want me to turn? It was sort of the turning point for the Oscars, and in many ways, in terms of Moonlight actually winning Best Picture, which if you're a film nerd, you know that's significant, but also in terms of the Oscars being sensational and sort of, if you want to get really sociological, just mess being prevalent everywhere that we are, like that is what gets attention, is just things going very, very wrong, very publicly.
Moonlight, your thoughts about that film?
I mean, just like a generational breakthrough, a Barry Jenkins film that is beautiful and moving and was really unlike anything that we had seen in mainstream cinema, but certainly anything that was being nominated for a Best Picture, right? Both in terms of the topics that it was covering, the perspective, how it was filmed, just beautiful. So an amazing movie. And then La La Land is a more traditional, I guess, Best Picture winner or Best Picture contender. And it was considered the heavy favorite because traditionally the Oscars love movies about Hollywood. And it is a movie about, with a deep homage to Singin' in the Rain, about two people just trying to make it in this crazy town. And so La La Land was also released by a larger studio. Moonlight was an A24 film, smaller budget. People just kind of figured the way the Oscars always go, it's going to go to La La Land. I was leaning La La Land, and I think, in terms of who I thought was going to win, not who I thought deserved to win, but I'm almost certain that I picked La La Land. So there's a tradition at the Oscars, particularly around Best Picture, of having sort of the elder statesmen and women of Hollywood give out Best Picture, which is a kinder way of saying people of a certain age or people over the age of 75. And so there's a moment where Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, two absolute legends, open the envelope and they look a little confused. And there is like a moment of, we don't know what to do. And your first impulse, which is like probably not the kindest impulse, but it's just like, all right, come on, like get your reading glasses, like get it together. What's going on? So then, like, I think they finally just say La La Land and kind of rush it out. And it feels sort of like anticlimactic, right? Because we've thought La La Land's gonna win. It's the last award of the night. Everyone's tired. Everybody wants to go home. And so I watched it. I was like, okay, La La Land. And I think I probably started getting ready to like spout off hot takes, which is what you have to do. And then people start trooping on the stage, and Ryan Gosling was in La La Land, and I love him. So I was like, oh, at least Ryan gets to be on the stage for a second. And then there's sort of a kerfuffle. And one of the producers says something, we didn't win, by the way. He's got the trophy in his hand and he's thanking people. And then he says, we didn't win anyway. And you're like, wait, what's going on? And so then another producer, Jordan Horowitz, comes up and he says, that's actually true. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture. And he holds up the envelope. Launched a million memes.
This is not a joke. Moonlight has won Best Picture. Moonlight, Best Picture.
And that's, I remember because I was doing the show with Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald, and we all like swiveled back to the TV and we're like, wait a second, what's going on? And so then at some point, people from Moonlight start getting up on stage. Barry Jenkins starts going up. Jimmy Kimmel, the host, figures out, okay, I got to get back up there. I think he was in the audience with Matt Damon for some sort of like, I hate Matt Damon bit that he continually does. Kimmel gets up, and I just remember him yelling, Warren, what did you do? Then it's just kind of chaos, and people are talking all over each other. And so I remember that Barry Jenkins did get to give some sort of abbreviated speech. Of course, it's not the moment that you would want for him as a filmmaker or for what is like a truly wonderful movie. But everyone was so confused, and Warren Beatty is already trying to like manage his reputation and be like, this is not what the envelope said. And, and you just see everyone doing damage control in real moment that I just remember everyone kind of being like, huh? But I also remember the excitement of being like, wait a second, Moonlight won, because it was really just not what we expected and not the type of film that really until 2017, the Oscars were rewarding. And so there was this moment of real excitement. I think I remember shouting very loudly, like, the best film actually won. So that was exciting, but it was subsumed by a bunch of people just like being completely messy on stage. Where was I when this happened? Was on a different Ringer video set, filming video footage for the Ringer. And so my actual reaction is on camera. I hope we've lost it. I was, not that I'm some great personality now, but I was very inexperienced and I think it was mostly shrieking, but it was very surprising. We didn't understand what was going on, and also cameras were rolling. So that is kind of blocked out the rest of the show. I don't remember what it was about. So here's what happened. Here's what happened, is that, and I think they changed the process, but anyway, the process of the Oscars is that there are 2 envelopes for every category. And depending on what side of the stage you're on, because people come from different sides, you get handed the envelope. So somehow, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway were given the other envelope for Best Actress, which went to Emma Stone from La La Land, instead of the Best Picture envelope. So they were confused because Emma Stone's name was on it, but they saw La La Land and they just like said La La Land. And then everyone behind the scenes and all the PricewaterhouseCoopers people, who are the accountants who do the tabulating, kind of rushed to action. But the Warren Beatty, after being on screen, being like, this is like, we were given the wrong envelope or whatever he said, apparently backstage insisted he would not give up the envelope that he was holding. And he was like holding it like, you know, incredible court case evidence, and was like, I will not be physically removed from this envelope until I can like go to the governor's ball and have some sort of public court to be acquitted of the crime of announcing the wrong nominee for Best Picture. Faye Dunaway was just like already home by then. She was just like, I'm out, like, see you later, which is why Faye Dunaway is a legend. But he inserts himself into this court case that he makes up after the fact and turns like all the parties into like justice for Warren Beatty. Really special. The wrong Best Picture thing was the turning point, right? Because that became the most memorable thing about the Oscars that night, and really any night in like the recent decades. And a lot of people who had stopped watching the Oscars were not like thriving in 2017. I mean, they haven't been thriving since the 90s. It's been sort of a slow decline, but you wouldn't say that like everyone was just desperate to find out who won. Everyone was desperate to find out who screwed up and what happened, that there was such a big mistake on TV. So it did put the Oscars back in the spotlight. Like we all remember that moment, even if we watch it on YouTube the next day. But then it does also set a precedent where people don't really care about the show. They just care about what crazy thing that is going to happen on the show. And that was certainly confirmed by a person who will not be named storming the stage and slapping the shit out of Chris Rock. But it's a fairly boring experience where people in suits or in fancy ball gowns get up there, read off the teleprompter, everyone claps, everyone has their moment. There aren't a lot of surprises at this point because we've all gotten, or at least those of us who care about the Oscars have gotten so good at prognosticating that you're just kind of nodding and clapping and waiting for the parties, I guess. And this was genuinely, no one had any idea what was going on. You don't see that often on live television. And also you definitely don't see it in circumstances where the stakes are just like very low, you know? Like no one died. Like no one was physically injured. It wasn't even the Chris Rock slap, you know? There was no like possible assault. It was just someone got a fancy award instead of someone else. Because it's live television. And that's another thing where, I mean, I guess now we have sporting events and then we have awards shows. And otherwise, there's usually some sort of room for editing or someone figuring it out and being like, oh, let us get you the right envelope. So you have to credit Kimmel. He handles it pretty well and at least keeps the show moving, gets Barry Jenkins and the Moonlight team on stage, makes a couple of jokes. I think the fact that he has been invited back to host the Oscars several times is an indication that, like, at least on the Academy's part, he handled a silly situation as best he could. It has definitely changed the Oscars, or at least is a really good representation of how the Oscars has changed. And I think you can point to this, not because of the fiasco, though that too, but just in terms of Moonlight's win and the types of movies that win. The Academy made a real effort about 10 years ago in the wake of Oscars So White to change the composition of its voting body. And they added a ton of members and a lot of international members, a lot of non-white guys, and you have seen the Best Picture winner change as a result. And so anything from Nomadland to Everything Everywhere All at Once to Parasite, those are small movies, and those are not movies that I think would have won necessarily in 1995. So I think Moonlight is the first, and I don't know whether you can say that then it like influenced how everyone voted. I think it just represented the changing voting body. But, you know, the Oscars in a lot of ways are just a summary of movie history. So it definitely is the change right there. It's a very neat way of describing it. And then in terms of the Oscars themselves as a show, and we as like a pop culture consuming public, I do think that we expect more spectacle and more shit show, for lack of a better word, in everything that we do. And that's really like all that breaks through. And, you know, it was early 2017. I'm sorry to say the T word, but like Trump had just been elected. But like we were just all in a very vulnerable and also media bomb sort of place, you know? And I do think that the show going off the rails was predictive of the things that get our attention now are the things going off the rails, you know? So I guess it just a premonition of what was to come. Listen, it is, you know, a made-up Hollywood award, but it's really significant in terms of film history and recognition. And I do think that the snafu is still remembered more than the victory. And I think that's a real shame. On the other side, as I said, the Oscars kind of function as film history, and like Moonlight has the win. You know, Moonlight is in the books. And so when people go back to study films and use the Oscars as some sort of guide of what's important, then at least Moonlight will get in front of them that way. And it probably got a boost at least. You know, there are people who heard of Moonlight for the first time that night, and they might not have if it had just been a normal victory. But I'm a traditionalist. I would have liked for Barry Jenkins to get his moment. It's fine. Everyone was so mad that he played a genie who fucks, but like, why can't the genie have sex? Like, where is it in lore? Children have to learn somewhere.